Folding your smartphone is something that Apple created with the iPhone 6 Plus, but I believe that Samsung perfected it in 2021 with the Samsung Z Fold3. That said, I have some news I hear no one talking about with this and other folding Samsung phones that really put a wrench in that idea of buying a used folding phone, let alone the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold3. Hello everyone, this is Matt from Real World Review. What a surprise. Almost as much of a surprise as another folding phone video, which I have reviewed at least 5 folding and flipping phones over the last few years. Regardless, what is good and bad about the Z Fold 3, and should we even consider buying these used? Yes, I believe it's not a bad move. For one, this is running Android 14, and not only that, I am running a current month security patch on this phone. That said, my Z Fold 2 is not, and this makes me think that the Z Fold 3 will end software support by the end of this year, meaning that it will most likely not get Android 15. Regardless, we do get the benefit of Android 14 or One UI 6, which means we are essentially on the same software as the Samsung S24. This includes a slight UI overhaul and styling that Samsung does well, making every software update noticeable, unlike some other phones that I've reviewed lately that got Android 14. With the smartphone that has a flexible screen, we get some benefits. They can be small, like the Samsung Z Flip screen up until the Z Flip 5 being somewhat pointless, to the outside screens on the Razr phones, which have always been nice to use, up to the Z Fold screens. Not the Galaxy Fold, but the Z Fold, which on the 3 is a 6.2 inch tall 832p OLED panel that runs at 120 Hz and about 1000 nits max brightness. This is covered by Gorilla Glass Victus, which starts a trend for these phones. The screen looks nice and surprisingly detailed, even though the pixel density is under 400 pixels per inch. One thing that is strange though is the screen ratio being 24.5 by 9, or technically thinner than cinematic widescreen at 21 by 9. Then opening up the phone, we get a 25.5 by 18 display, being a 7.6 inch 1768 by 2208 flexible OLED panel that also features a 120 Hz display and roughly 1000 nits peak brightness. This is where the magic is, but also the plastic. The screen is amazing to watch videos on, but only in the dark. Watching videos during the day makes the reflections obvious, as well as that crease. But again, using this at night is like having a small tablet that can still fold into a regular phone. But there is some aspect of this that makes you shift gears in many ways. For one, you're holding metal, but touching plastic. The screen, trim, and these little hinge protectors are all plastic while the frame is metal. And lastly, the front screen and the back are glass. This is neither here nor there, and also something that all folding and flipping phones are made out of, but it makes you realize that you gotta be careful to enjoy the screen. Trim those fingernails, don't push too hard, and obviously close the thing. I'm honestly surprised to see how many people in real life actually use a Z Flip and keep it open even in their pocket. It's just baffling to me. There is a little area for the inside camera, which we will talk about later, but speaking of fragile, S Pen support. Yes, it's only the Fold and Pro edition, whatever the latter is, but it does support it for those that thought that the pen was only a Note or Ultra thing. It does only work on the inside screen, so there's that. I don't really use it, so I'm not really the one to boast about it, but at least you get that option. The frame is nice, shiny aluminum for the hinge, while the rest is a matte aluminum with cutouts for the dual speakers, 4 total microphone holes, volume buttons, ultra-wideband antenna if you have the US version, SIM tray that unsurprisingly doesn't support an SD card, the power button that has a fingerprint scanner built in, and of course, the USB-C 3.2 port that allows for 25 watts of wired charging. The back is glass with 3 cameras and a flash and a hidden microphone, but the back is also hiding the 11-watt wireless charging as well as reverse wireless charging, which yes, I use from time to time. This powers the 4,400 mAh total dual cells in this phone, which is concerning to me because both cells are different sizes. Luckily, there is an IPX8 rating, meaning that it is water resistant, but changing the batteries will ruin that if water resistance isn't gone already. This is a big phone, being as thick as 2 phones in most cases, and weighing 271 grams. Does that make this phone bad? No, but I don't like how heavy this phone is. And the thickness, like I just said, feels like having 2 phones in your pocket. People consider the Zenfone 9 to be thick, so what would they call this? And most of all, it's for nothing. The outside screen is too small. Google, Huawei, and OnePlus all know this, which is why they make all their folding phones with much better outer screens. Even the Razr looks good simply because the width is decent given the size. And the inner screen is okay. Being square like this is strange because I don't think people want to use a folding phone in portrait mode, or they would have just bought the flip. Instead, if this opened to a 16 by 9 or even an 18 by 9 screen, it would have made more sense, filling more of the screen with content instead of looking like this. And let's get over the folding aspect. I can't stand that people think folding it and running 2 apps is even an option. Watching a video like this is worse than watching it on an iPhone mini, and that has a smaller screen. Then sometimes you have the front camera, which hides itself and is a super tiny screen that has a low resolution, to where you can literally see every individual dot. It's 176 dots. Also, this is what happens when you switch cameras. But again, this is to cover the front camera, which is a 4 megapixel camera, because why? It doesn't look good in the first place, but this is what Samsung has stuck to. The outside camera is definitely more usable, and I would just rely on that camera if you care about having a front camera in the first place. The phone is a ticking time bomb though. Remember how I said that there's something no one talks about? Well, this is the issue. The hinge will destroy this phone. Sometimes dropping the phone will damage the soft metals in the hinge and push into the screen, causing it to break. That's okay, I guess, since it's not entirely the phone's fault, but it is a weak point that shouldn't exist. Then we have the screen protector, which is nice that it comes stock on the front and inside screen, but both will need to be replaced at some point. It's also easy for dust and dirt to get stuck in the inside one, which I assume causes the screen to damage the glass, which then pushes into the plastic screen and destroys it. Yes, the inside screen is actually glass, but it has a plastic layer that goes over it, which has the screen protector go over that, meaning you do get glass and none of the benefits of it. Instead, this actually creates a bigger problem which may or may not be covered by warranty on newer folds and flips, but is definitely not covered on the Z Fold3s anymore. The last way that the hinge destroys your phone, which is crazy to say, is not even the hinge, and not even the screen. It's the cable that connects the screen to the board. On the flips and folds, there's a cable connecting to the top and bottom boards, which then connect to the display. What happens is over time that cable wears down, which is not a new idea, but an almost impossible thing to fix. Not only do you have to remove the riveted plastic trim, but you also have to remove the screen, all without breaking either, to replace that cable. And the issues I've seen with that cable is random rebooting, speakers not working, and being unable to send the screen image to the logic board. Yes, I've had the last one happen the other day. The screen was perfectly fine, just wouldn't show anything on the screen because that cable wasn't working properly. I have the screen right here, which I use for data recovery for Z Flip 3s because connecting the screen cables causes the phone to shut down when you open up the phone. But this screen still works. These are all problems that will happen with the Z Flip 3, 4, and even the 5 and apply to the folds as well. Hopefully Samsung did already notice this and fixes it later, but what does that mean for buying used Z Fold 3s? Maybe none of this matters. Maybe it does. I noticed the other day that my Z Fold 2 back is lifting, but that's not where the battery is. I personally never owned technically never owned any phone that failed in my ownership, but it doesn't mean that that doesn't happen. I bought this phone used about 2 years ago, and it's still working fine. I love having this phone for the bigger and smaller screen all in one, but I can tell that the battery life does degrade. I'm not super hard on my phone, but even when I am, getting through the day is possible, but 2-day battery life is not a thing on here. The Snapdragon 888 chip in here is plenty fast, and you can't tell me that 12 gigabytes of RAM is not enough, especially when you do get another 8 gigabytes of virtual RAM. 256 gigabytes of UFS 3.1 storage is stock, with mine being 512 gigabytes that I've barely used. In 2024, everything I throw at this phone, software-wise, is fine. Heavy games are meant for the newest processors, but even this chip can still hold its own. If you're actually able to make this phone crawl, you're doing way more than you really need to. This is a bulky phone, and I'm still technically not a fan of that. It wears down shirts and jacket pockets, and the thickness is just too much if you're trying to put this in your pant pocket with anything else. Connectivity-wise, this has everything you want, like Wi-Fi 6, 5G, and ultra-wideband support, Bluetooth 5.2, and eSIM capabilities. The cameras are all good. Like I said, 10 megapixel front camera with the inside one being the not so good 4 megapixel one, so 1080p 60 frames per second max here, while the front and rear camera can get 4K at 60 frames per second. Yes, only the main rear camera for some reason. The rear cameras are all 12 megapixels, with there being a wide and a 2x telephoto sensor, which are both optically stabilized, and the last one being a fixed focus ultra-wide camera. The way I look at this decent camera set is that it's nice to have for photos and gives you some range, but clearly the main appeal of the phone is the main wide camera. That said, the camera does speak for itself, so I'll let you look at some samples. And that's the thing about this phone. You have the option of phone or tablet, multiple types of cameras, and many options in the software, but at the end of the day, this phone does all that you need, but doesn't always do it perfectly. Sure, this is so Samsung can make a better phone next year, but it also seems difficult to make a good quality folding phone in the first place. The way I see the Fold series is kind of like a better Rolex. Sure, folding and flipping phones are way more common, but the Fold just feels classy. And the nice thing is that it isn't a Rolex. This is a phone that does well and does everything in a good, acceptable way. To be honest, I keep this phone and haven't upgraded my Fold because I always believed that Samsung did figure it out on the third number phone, even though it was technically their fourth try. The Fold 4 brings a higher megapixel camera, and the Fold 5 brought, well, not much more. I'm curious for the Fold 6, but until then, I still believe that the Fold 3 is a good quality phone that earns that price and title. I spent a long time creating this review, actually making this my third copy of this review, but technically my fourth copy, kind of like what Samsung did with this phone. It feels fitting. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and as always, thanks for watching.